Thank you very much, James Babb from we1fly.com for sharing your comments today. I'd like to start by posing questions to the panelists. He's for activist and founder of we1fly.com, James Babb. And the question is this, one can imagine that right now we're talking about the scanners only in the context of airports, but should this technology prove popular and the citizens accept it, one could imagine that you have to go through similar devices to get your daughters into school, to visit the institutions at the Smithsonian here and in other museums all over the world, and furthermore to access your place of work or to petition the government. What do you think the grassroots movement that you have started can do in order to put a halt to this, what seems like a difficult to stop progression?
You've raised an excellent question and a very good point that this technology is not limited to airports. There is no reason to believe that it's going to stop there and we can merely stop flying to avoid this abuse. They're already experimenting with it in train stations, subways, even bus stations. People are subjected to these invasive sexual assaults. It's totally unacceptable everywhere. So as activists, we just have to say no. We have to resist at every turn. We have to draw the line here and now that this is absolutely unacceptable under any circumstances. There's nothing they can say to us that should justify submitting our families to this kind of abuse. It is absolutely unacceptable for human beings. If we do nothing now, we will see it on the streets, at the train, at the schools. We will not be able to escape it. We are at a turning point right now. This is why we must take bold action now and not compromise, not let them say, well, look, we're going to do a little bit nicer groping, because it won't end it. We need to end it firmly and without compromise right now.
That's not Americans for Progress. I would like to ask Mr. Babb and Michael Roberts, the pilot. You've both spoken out very strongly, I mean the whole panel has, about the invasive pat-downs and the scanners, and you're saying we should basically turn this over to free enterprise, I believe. I mean, some people are saying that, but can you give us some hard and fast examples of what you would do to fix it, what you would do to change it, because we haven't really heard that yet.
Sure. Airlines invest billions of dollars in their hardware. They have incredibly valuable employees that require a huge amount of training. They have their entire customer base to protect. Do you think stockholders will have an interest in keeping these assets secure? Of course, they have an extreme motive to protect these incredible assets. The motives of politicians are very different. That's what we have right now. Politicians need to look like they're doing something. That's why we end up with security theater. That's why we end up with a centralized bureaucracy. We get 67,000 tax feeders participating in a make-work program that ends up becoming a sexual assault. So the point is, trust in the incentives.
Wait for the mic.
Trust in the incentives of the airlines. They have the best motive to protect us.
But how? And that's what I'm asking you. Can you give us an example? Should we go away from the machinery? Should we focus more on training the people who work for the TSA, who are giving us these pat-downs, who are supposed to be interrogating us, asking us pertinent questions? For example, I was born in Morocco. I had my passport stolen in Paris several years ago. I'm American. When I come into this country, I always get this, or to any country, I'm always asked, oh, you're born in Morocco. When I say yes, but I left when I was 2, they drop the subject. They then ask me about my stolen passport. And eventually they removed that from the records because they were wasting their time and mine. In Israel, I got, you get the same questions, but they move on more quickly. And another example, I had a friend who, when she came back from Egypt, she was asked by somebody over here, did you meet any Egyptians? And she said, well, what do you think? I mean, she's Arab American. But it just seems to me that the TSA, instead of going to the conferences in the sunny places when it's cold over here, they should maybe be sending the people who we're all complaining about, who give us the pat-downs, and teach them a better way to screen for a would-be terrorist. It's much of what Mr. Lutbach was saying, but we're all complaining, but not giving any solutions, and that's what I would like to see as a fairly frequent traveler.
If I may, what you're describing is you would like to see professional security procedures, and in order to have that, we need to put the decision-making process in the hands of professionals, and not, as Jim made a point, in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats who are driven by other motivations. Professionals care about the mission. When I'm flying the airplane, I'm thinking about what I'm doing. I'm not thinking about business deals and back rooms and kickbacks or anything else. I'm thinking about what my job is that's right in front of me. Professional security, people who work in that industry, whether they did it in-house with the airlines or they did it as contractors. And I'm not talking about using contractors to carry out TSA's mandates. I'm talking about the decision-making process being placed in the hands of people who have a vested interest in the quality of their work, legitimate professionals. That's what you want. That's what you just described. And good luck getting it from the state.
Very good.
Kate?
I'd like to take a stab at answering from the flyers' rights perspective, because I think what you're hearing is that we all agree that the scanners and the new intrusive genital type pat-downs are something that we can't live with and that need to be abolished, or at least made as a secondary screening method for people who do present a risk. But in the beginning, like I said, I was very reluctant to take on this issue because I represent airline passengers, most of whom travel a lot. And their primary concern was their safety and security when they travel. And many people weren't initially last January at all convinced after Lab that they were safe. And so they automatically were accepting these new intrusive measures. Well, I began an exploration with a number of professors and people who are experts in different types of detection. And it does appear to me that there was no exploration by the TSA into any alternatives. They appeared to have signed contracts in 2006 in the prior administration that they were committed to keeping. The order for these units were made in October of 2009, 2 months before Lab got on that plane. He just actually benefited Rakistan in terms of convincing the U.S. that this was the only solution to solving our security issues. But canines are actually a much better detector of explosives. So if we're committed to finding explosives, that would be one possible solution, and they are used around the world. Biometric technology, which has been mentioned here, where you can give an iris scan and fingerprints and have a background check, which I have with FlyClear, I found to be an acceptable way of creating a low-risk group of what you call, I guess, a fly list of people who can move pretty quickly through the security process, where the focus could then be on people that do actually present a risk. So there are other answers out there that would not create the sexualized intrusiveness that you now have with the scanners and these new pat-downs, and many other alternatives I'm sure that we haven't heard about. The thing that I've been negatively impressed by with all this was the idea that corporations seem to be driving all of the technology implementation into TSA, and it has nothing to do with what is best for us.
Any audience questions here in the room? Please.
Okay. I think that the technology could be used if it was voluntary. The problem is it's being forced on people. If you want to go to, if you want to say, look, I'm going to fly on Scope and Grove Airline, okay, go ahead. okay? As soon as you start forcing that on someone else, you're the bad guy. So the technology is inherently possibly dangerous. There's certainly been a lot of risks associated with it, but as individuals, we have the right to choose the level of risk appropriate for ourselves. So I say, security, make your own call. The overall procedures of what they're doing, absolutely opposed to that. The entire process, absolutely opposed to that.
Other panelists?
Can you repeat the question?
The question by Oblong one of the remote participants, is whether the people in this panel oppose the technology, the process, or both.
Okay, we oppose both as a primary screening method. We don't believe that regular human beings should be presumed to be guilty of anything when they approach a security checkpoint, and that they should not be automatically, all of them, put through the scanners or the pat-downs. Now, if someone presents a risk, then they could be used as a secondary screening method, which is what we're encouraging the TSA to do. Retire them to those who present a risk.
Allow yourself to go through a metal detector. Why wouldn't you allow yourself to go through a millimeter wave detector? I understand the radiation causes of backscatter. So my question is, we've already imposed these security measures that we've accepted with the metal detectors and the x-rays of our bags and even some searches, and then they've kind of creeped more and more with the technology, and now the process is very skewed. I agree, and I don't know why we're searching pilots, because they fly the plane. You can have a gun, you can have explosives, take it on. You fly my plane. It's just absurd, right?
It is.
So that's why my point is it the technology? Is it the process, or is it both?
Please, Michael.
Well, I'll try to just continue to address your question there. I can tell you what my thought process was through the years about the metal detectors. It's kind of ridiculous, like you say. Not just because I'm a pilot. It's unreasonable. Is it unreasonable search and seizure? Yeah, it probably is. And to my shame, you know, I bartered that little bit of my liberty to take off my shoes, and go through the thing, so I could get to work, because I viewed it as a hassle more than a total violation, which is what I see what's going on now as. But how about we use our brains? You know, stop using all these expensive pieces of equipment, because many guns and metal objects somehow get through security, have for many years, even with the metal detectors. So it's the fundamental approach to the whole thing. The process, the technology. Technology might be useful if it were used in a lawful way, but I mean, strip searching, virtual or otherwise, you don't do that until you have exhausted other ways of screening. And then it's probably time to get law enforcement involved if you really need to take somebody's clothes off and see what they've got under, So that's a big flaw in the process and the technology. I don't care if they use scanners or physically strip search somebody when it's justified, but it's not justified when you walk in the door. And then looking forward with the technology, biometrics. Is that a solution? A lot of people, you wait a few more weeks and months, you'll see that is touted as the solution. Okay, we'll stop strip searching, we'll stop putting our hands on you. Just look at this little, iris scanner, and you'll be on your way. Well, does that give the government more or less control over our comings and goings? So I think we need to be real careful with that.
Kate, without debating, any last words?
Thank you.
Thanks. I would just like to close with something positive, something that people can do to help oppose this. I'm not writing any letters to Congress. I have no interest in politely asking them to adjust the position of their boot on my throat. The position of what We Won't Fly is doing is we are telling people to opt out of TSA abuse. Just make a choice for yourself and your family. Say no. Do not fly if it means you're going to have to put up with this. Send a clear message to the industry that says, no, we will not purchase your services if it means we're going to be abused, period. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, particularly the Electronic Privacy Information Center, the panelists, as well as the audience members who either